So what you see here is the video installation made for the New York room of the Mondriaanhuis in Amersfoort. And this video installation lets the visitors experience the last stage of Mondriaan's artistic development. Around the World War II years, he moved to New York, and there he struggles to free himself from his self-imposed limitations of working with black lines, colored rectangles, work you're probably familiar with. In the installation we see how he first moves towards using colored lines and finally arrives at using only shimmering squares of bright color in his landmark piece Broadway Boogie Woogie. Mondriaan was a member of the art movement The Style, and I discovered that some composers were also members, like George Untitled, whose work I knew vaguely. So then when I researched Untitled a bit more, I stumbled upon his Ballet Mécanique, which is an automated piece, and that made me think of the pieces that Conlon and Caro wrote for player piano, including Boogie Woogie inspired pieces. And Mondriaan, of course, was a Boogie Woogie fan, so that's where the whole idea of doing some kind of automated music for this installation started. So in the beginning of the piece, we see images of New York. Mondriaan is traveling there, and for the opening of the composition, I basically used a simple dominant 7 chord, E dominant 7. But I voiced it in a more jazzy way. I think I used something like this. And then this chord voicing is played on the 2 dissectors, and each note of the chord is repeated in a different rhythmic pattern. And as we get nearer to the city, the rhythmic patterns that have a 2-3 relationship, they get emphasized, so there comes a sort of swing in the feel of the piece. So for the next section of the piece, I worked with stacked fifths in piano voicings, like this. So this gives you a minor 11th chord. You can also drop the left hand by a semitone. Now we have a major chord with sharp 11th, and then I created rhythmic patterns with these voicings. So through the Untitled and Caro inspiration, I arrived at the idea of using a disc clavier. But there's a bit more to that. At first sight, the works of Mondriaan, as we know them, especially from reproductions in popular culture, they seem very rigid, almost digital. But when you look more closely, you see that they are actually very tactile and human. You can see the paint, even pieces of tape on the works. So I thought that using a disc clavier would perhaps give a similar combination of rigidity and an organic sound, because you have, like, on the one hand the exact programmed patterns that you can have the disc clavier play, but on the other hand it's still wooden hammers hitting real strings. In the end I used 2 disc claviers, or rather one which did an overdub, because of quick note repetitions I wanted. Because I discovered that while the disc clavier is an incredible virtuoso instrument, it's still a piano, it's a physical instrument. So how quick a note can repeat, that's determined by how quick a hammer bounces back from a string and can be struck again. And in addition to the disc claviers, I felt I wanted to add a saxophone to connect the music with the jazzy vibe of New York in the 40s. I can add 2 more things. First, the piece is called I Paint Modern, and that's because it's an anagram of Piet Mondriaan. I didn't work that out myself, but I was happy to steal it. And another thing, there are actually 2 endings to the composition. At the end of his artistic struggle, when Mondriaan arrives at the Broadway Boogie Woogie, he finds freedom. And my interpretation of this freedom was that he found peace, tranquility, that the struggle was over. So I wrote an ending resembling that feeling, quiet, peaceful. But the creative director of the installation had a different interpretation. His idea was that Mondriaan ended in a triumph, full of energy, almost a literal victory boogie woogie. So I rewrote the ending, and the end that you will hear when you visit the Mondriaanhuis, that's the triumphant, energetic ending. But here in this video I'll play you the original ending I wrote.